Assalamu alaikum everyone, and on behalf of Beacon House School System, the organizer of SOT events, I'd like to welcome you to edition 15, Guardians of the Future, the first of a series of hybrid conferences to come. The non-profit SOT event series was launched by Beacon House in 2000 as part of its CSR and to help inform the direction of the organization, while also engaging global communities in conversations shaping the future of schools. My name is Sahar Basit, and I'm going to be moderating this session. So this is going to be a 45-minute session with about 10 to 15 minutes at the end for all of you to ask questions. You may put questions, you may raise your hands to put your questions forth. They will be written on a piece of paper and shown to me, and I will ask the panel accordingly. So I'm going to start the conversation by introducing all of our panelists. First of all, we have Ms. Romina Qureshi on the panel. She has been teaching Urdu in the US since 2008. She was a lead instructor and later program director at University of Pennsylvania from 2008 to 2014. She is the Urdu pedagogy expert at NYU Hindi Urdu Training Institute and is a visiting faculty at AKU IET. Then we have Dr. Leanne Wooten. She is an experienced school and adult education program leader. She is a lead consultant for school principals on change management projects and is an IB curriculum manager for international and IB curricula. Dr. Leanne has authored transnational and EU proposals on education. Dr. Leanne is fluent in English, French, and German, and is presently principal of Beacon House Newlands, Islamabad, a leading world IB continuing school. Next up, we have Ali Shaba Naeem. She's an A-level student of Beacon House Liberty Campus, Lahore. She is currently entrusted with the position of sports representative by her institution. Ali Shaba is an aspiring business student and plans to major in business management to continue her parents' business. Her aim is to become the future leader by revolutionizing the dynamics and standing structure of education and curriculum in the schools of Pakistan at all levels. Next up in person, we have Ms. Kandil Piracha. She's a second year MYP and DP teacher at TNS, my fellow colleague. Before joining TNS in 2001, she was working with Alliance Française. Alongside teaching French, she's also a founding member of Pro Nature Alliance Research and Development, an all-women-led startup that works on empowering women and developing nature-based solutions for the problems faced by the agriculture sector in Pakistan. At PNA, she leads communications for programs by the World Bank and the UN. She holds a degree in BSc Economics and Politics from Lund. Online, we have Mr. Florian Bachu. He is a World School Senior Manager based at the Global IB Center in Singapore. He engages with all international baccalaureate authorized schools in Pakistan to provide partnership, guidance, and support so that they achieve their optimum teaching, learning, and assessment objectives. He's focused on advocating for school priorities while promoting increased depth and breadth of program development and also serving as a catalyst for school success through IB evaluation. He holds a master's degree in international education and a doctorate in educational administration from universities in the United States. Can we just have a little round of applause for our esteemed panelists here today? So to kind of start off the discussion, Mr. Florian, if we could actually start with you. For the audience, could you tell us what translanguaging actually means, both in academia as well as in practicality?
Thank you for your question, and thank you for the invitation to join this esteemed panel at SOT. And I would like to preface my answer to your question with some perspective on language learning that we have at the IB, at the International Baccalaureate, that you've probably heard and are practicing in your own schools. First of all, I think language is fundamental to all learning, thinking, and communicating, and it really permeates the whole curriculum and the student learning experiences. And we like to say in the IB world that all teachers are language teachers. And you might wonder what that really means, because it sounds like a great mantra. What I think it can mean is that subject teachers, specialists, scientists, and all disciplines teacher are directly responsible to teach their subjects with specific vocabulary, their academic language to students. In addition, an inquiry-based education provides an authentic context for students to develop and use their languages. And finally, students' first language should not be replaced by a new language adopted by the school in a scenario also known as subtractive bilingualism, but in fact, to use the additional language, usually the language of instruction, in a scenario of additive bilingualism, when the new language enhances what students are bringing to school in terms of languaging. So really translanguaging, to go to your question, it's that process in which students draw on all the gifts they bring to school, on all their languages, naturally and flexibly, to combine the elements of their known languages to meet their communicative and social needs at school and beyond. And this really challenges the monolingual assumptions and makes multilingualism and bilingualism as a standard discourse. So it can refer to teaching practices that use bilingualism as a resource instead of viewing it as a problem. Here we have to learn another language through another language, in another language, and really going beyond traditional notions of learning additional languages. So it can describe the practices of all students and educations who use bilingualism and multilingualism as a resource. What it looks like in reality, to kind of get your thinking going also, it's really the degree to which students translanguage is determined by the teachers do in the classroom. When the teachers encourage translanguaging, then the students are more likely to do it. When teachers demonize students' home languages, students will default to English. In the worst case scenario, students will internalize that their languages and cultures are not as valuable as the English and the Anglo-Saxon culture. So a student, for example, enrolled with an English-only policy in school may perceive English as superior to their home language. So it's so important that teachers understand the many ways and many facets in which they can really practically encourage translanguaging in school and welcoming student gifts into the classroom, having them compare a language concept in English to their home language, providing translation of key vocabulary in students' home languages, displaying work produced in the home language, inviting students to collaborate using their home languages, and then encouraging students to use home language texts and videos to process content in the language of instruction are all really good suggestions in terms of using home languages in the English instruction medium. I hope this answer most of your question. I'll be interested to hear what others have to say.
Another IB expert. What are your views on translanguaging, and how have you incorporated that in your own teaching over the years?
Well, again, good morning, everyone, and thank you for coming to listen to us. I feel very honored to be here, and thank you as well for putting up with the technical difficulties that we've experienced, and for also being here, although it's quite warm. I really, really appreciate that. I'd like to preface this a little bit as someone who is old enough to know what it meant to be in classrooms where other children were shamed because they spoke other languages at home. They were perceived as less intelligent and less able and less capable just because they clearly came from an environment where English was not the language that was spoken at home. And I can remember being in classrooms where the teacher would shush kids who would speak with each other in another language other than English or French. I'm Canadian, so I grew up in a bilingual environment. So the research, however, now, I'm just looking at a few articles that I've printed off on translanguaging, and there are even articles, scholarly and peer-reviewed articles that have been written in Pakistan at your universities, so bravo for that there is actually now research, very credible research coming out of Pakistan on translanguaging, and with some very interesting qualitative and quantitative results. So bravo to Pakistan universities for picking up this very difficult subject and bringing it to the fore and actually adding your input into the whole scenario. So getting back to what I was just talking about, growing up and having lived through the shaming of people who spoke more languages, we've now come, thankfully, to a more enlightened stance on translanguaging, where the research definitely shows that the more languages you speak, actually the better you do, the better you do at school. And in fact, these kids surpass kids who are monolingual. From a point of view, if there is a difference between people who are monolingual, bilingual, and multilingual. For example, a multilingual environment would be having immigrant parents growing up, let's say in Canada, from Portugal. You come to school and you are learning in English, but you are also in the environment speaking a lot of French, okay? So this sounds like very contrived, but it's not. This is actually the life of many people living around the world. And you can find a similar situation in Pakistan where maybe you are speaking a language at home other than Urdu, but you have to learn Urdu because it's the language of the country. But then again, at school you're learning in English. And it's perfectly normal for all of us, those of us in and out of a classroom, to hear all kinds of languages, kids explaining an issue that they can't understand in English, but helping their peers in Urdu, or actually speaking sort of a mix between English and Urdu, and they're able to get their point across because the words that come to them first are in the language they feel the most comfortable in. And this is all perfectly okay. Translanguaging is not something that is set in stone. It's fluid. It's something that happens moment to moment. And whatever language a word comes to first, that is the word that is uttered, but it's put together in a sense that everyone understands because they have some kind of knowledge of those languages being spoken in that particular moment. So for me, in terms of the context of my job, I'm head of school, but I do, because we have difficulty finding qualified IB level teachers at the DP level in French and German, I'm often called to go back into the classroom, and I'm happy to do that. And when I go into my German class, I close the door. I only speak in German. Even if someone speaks to me in English because they don't have the German for the question, I will answer in German because I want the target language to be expressed the most in that classroom. But that doesn't mean that I disallow a conversation in Urdu to explain a grammatical point, and it doesn't mean that I disallow an utterance in English just because that child feels that they can get their point across most clearly and most quickly in English. I hope that makes sense. Thank you so much for listening.
Okay, so how do you bring translanguaging into when you are training Urdu teachers? What are your thoughts about translanguaging?
Thank you. So I'm going to give it a different perspective, like you said. So I have been an Urdu Hindi teacher trainer for the last 7 years, and translanguaging is new for us as well. We have been training our teachers to remain in the target language, just like Leanne said, give the students an immersive experience. And this past July, when we had a training institute, in which we actually opened up for teachers in Pakistan as well, because I'm training teachers in Pakistan as well, we introduced the phenomena, we introduced the topic of translanguaging. Translanguaging is not a pedagogy. It is a phenomena. It happens whenever you're bilingual, you're multilingual, you are going to translanguage. We were just talking, और हम बातें करते करते, we switched from one topic to another. उसने ये कहा, मैंने ये कहा. I'm translanguaging. I'm communicating with you with the linguistic repertoire I have. I am not an Urdu speaker with my brain, कि अच्छा ये ज़बान Urdu है, okay, this is English, and I have to think that, oh, I have to use this English word or that Urdu word. It comes naturally. So translanguaging happens when you're monolingual, when you're multilingual or you're bilingual, and our goal is कि जो monolingual बच्चे हैं, जैसे अमेरिका की सोसाइटी में, अमेरिका के हिसाब से I can speak, वहाँ पे बच्चे ज़्यादातर monolingual हैं. कोशिश ये है कि वो bilingual हो जाएं या multilingual हो जाएं. तो उनको उस तरफ लेकर जाना, उसमें translanguaging का बहुत हाथ होता है, बहुत मदद होती है. I will give an example from a recent teacher training I had in SOT. It was up in the mountains. The school was for disadvantaged children. And they don't even speak Urdu very well. So the teachers, they speak Pashto. The students speak Pashto. but the curriculum is in English, and they have to learn Urdu as well. So imagine the difficulty level. And you see the concept of translanguaging happening in front of your eyes. They have to explain a concept to a student. They use the Pashto word for it. Or if they're teaching something in English, agar Pashto nahi, to they'll use the Urdu word for it. And when in a classroom, when the students help each other in understanding the content, your goal in a language classroom is always to increase the students' proficiency in that language. So I'm an Urdu teacher, so my goal is to increase Urdu proficiency. I will not keep translating everything for them. My goal is if you know another language that will help you communicate with your partner better, we always do partnered and paired activities and group activities, then use it. So for in a classroom example, the strategies we would give teachers, or which were told to teachers in discussions, I have not implemented them yet, because it was my first time learning about translanguaging in the Teacher Training Institute this past July. But we were given examples of how if your student is supposed to write an essay, and they are Urdu ka essay, for example, and they don't have all the vocabulary, it's okay. If they have to write a 10 to 15 line essay and they use 5 or 6 English words in there, it's okay. Because the structure, the grammar, the content, all will be Urdu. लेकिन अगर उनको explain करने के लिए, समझाने के लिए अंग्रेज़ी के कुछ अल्फाज डालने पड़े, it's okay. You're going to bring them to the level where the next time they will use 3, and the time after that it will be all in Urdu. So you're going to help build their proficiency through translanguaging. Yeah, so it's a new phenomena. It's very interesting. We will have to unlearn some of our learning as far as teacher training goes and our practices in the classroom, but it makes perfect sense.
Kandil, I'll now come to you as the French teacher on the panel. As Dr. Liane mentioned, she often just speaks completely in German in her classroom. So do you do that in your French classroom? And how does that work for you?
Yes, so I try to. For the most part, I try to conduct the entire class in French because we're in Pakistan, right? So the exposure that the students have with French and with the French culture and the language is very limited outside of the classroom. So it's really important for me to try and immersify them in the French language as much as I can during that lesson. However, at the same time, as Dr. Liane mentioned, I do not discourage them from using any other language that they're comfortable speaking in or communicating in. Sometimes, for example, when I'm doing grammar with them in French, I cannot draw parallels with English. It's a lot easier to draw parallels between French grammar and Urdu grammar. So if somebody just speaks English, right, they have no idea about Urdu, it's very hard to explain to them that everything, every word in every all the vocabulary words, every single word in French or German has a gender. So I feel like that comes as a culture shock to anybody who speaks just English. However, the benefit for the students in studying French in Pakistan is that they're already familiar with this concept in Urdu. So when I'm explaining that to them, मैं उर्दू में आ जाती हूँ. मैं कहती हूँ मुज़क्कर मुअन्नस है ना, लड़का होता है, लड़की होती है. Similarly, the same gender rules apply to French. Obviously, they have to memorize the vocabulary. That's separate. But it's easier for me to explain it to them, and it's easier for them to understand as well because it gives them context. And at the same time, like when we're doing speaking and everything, I give them a topic. This is our topic. Let's suppose we're doing pollution or we're doing recycling, and they have to give me a presentation. So they have 15 minutes. It's a group activity. They will all conduct the discussions in whatever language that they feel comfortable in, whether it's Urdu or Punjabi or English. But then in the end, when they get together, they form a word wall and they find all the words and the sentences, they do present in French. So translanguaging is something, I wasn't familiar with what this phenomenon was until recently. But when I read up on it, it's something that we do on a daily basis. It just comes as second nature to us. Like whenever we're trying to speak to somebody and we feel that we're missing a word, I don't know a word in English, but I know the Urdu equivalent of that word, so I'll automatically switch to Urdu. So we're automatically doing it on a daily basis without even realizing it. And I think it's time that we start start teaching this to our students and our parent bodies in the school as well, that there's nothing wrong with it by allowing your child to speak in the language that they're more comfortable in. It will help them foster and become more proficient in other languages that they're learning.
Thank you, Kandil. Alishaba, I'll come to you now. So from a student perspective, what is your take on translanguaging? Do you think there's any challenges that you face in the classroom because
yes,
connecting to
absolutely.
translanguaging?
Yes, absolutely. Before I start off, I would like to quote a quotation. Nations are built or destroyed in a classroom. This quotation shows that the inside working of a classroom is very important for the backbone of a nation. Here, we need to know what is important in a classroom and what is happening in a classroom, like translanguaging. If there's an issue in a classroom in understanding in a subject, or if there's a hindrance in the communication between a teacher and a student, it needs to be addressed by translanguaging. There are many issues that we face just because of that absence. Like, for example, usually, we need to understand that not many teachers in our school come from a well-off background, well-off institutions. They come from government schools where the English language skills are a bit weak. So we need to understand that there is a problem. Their challenges are also faced by the teacher equally as well as the students. If there's a challenge faced by teacher, the direct impact also happens on the student. Like, for example, the teacher is, because usually our admin has a condition that you have to teach, you are obliged to teach and communicate with the student in certain language like English. Over there, if the teacher is not comfortable with this language such as English, they'll have to convert their concept from Urdu to English consistently. This will result in the wastage of time of the student and the classroom. Moreover, the concept during that thought process is lost. For example, if the teacher is more comfortable in teaching in Urdu, the concept in Urdu, when converting from Urdu to English, they might lose 50% of the concept because the essence is no longer over there. So how can you expect a student to grasp that concept well when the teacher is not able to explain it in that way? The student might only cover, like 20% of the concept. This impact could be seen in the results of the student. Even in the future, when the student is a step into the professional world, they might feel a bit lack in their fields because there is a hollow gap caused by the missing of that concept. And we could overcome this by implementing translanguaging. From the get-go, if the teacher teaches in Urdu inside, they switch to Urdu and English, they teach the concept, we can expect the students to learn majority of the concept and then excel in the fields. From personal experience, we used to have a physics teacher. He was obliged to speak English in our classroom in O levels. We used to ask him if he could repeat the concept because the terminologies were too hard for us to understand. But he said, no, I am asked to quote the sentence in English, I will do so. And we did not understand that, and the results were seen in examinations. But soon when we got a teacher changed, that teacher, she felt no shame in converting her concepts to Urdu. And that way we understood the concepts better, and the results were seen in our results, and I could still communicate those concepts to another student because I understand them well. So I believe that translanguaging is really important, and we need to see how these could be implemented in our classrooms in a better way.
Would you like to follow up on that?
So I want to follow up to what Alishaba just said. Very important. And we were just talking about this point, Urdu ki prestige. And I was talking to Leanne this morning about the prestige of Urdu and about the lack of training that Urdu teachers have. And I can only speak from the Urdu teacher's perspective because that's what I do. When the teachers are trained, we teach the way we have been taught, right? So if you bring somebody into a classroom they were never taught before, you put them in the classroom, they're going to teach the way they were taught 20, 30 years ago, however many years ago that was. So what is of paramount importance is to train your Urdu teachers. Train your Urdu teachers in pedagogy. When you train your teachers, they will learn concepts like translanguaging. They will learn concepts like global competency and cultural competency that a student must gain in order to be a successful 21st century student, right? That's what we all strive for. And we were also talking about the fact that so much emphasis is placed on English in our society. It's very unfortunate. When people go live abroad like myself, I've been in the US for almost 32 years now, and you realize the importance of your language, how large a part of identity that is. So it's very important. So we were talking about the fact that schools like Beacon House, like Newlands, you all have the resources, and you are a school that others look up to, and emulate and follow. I think it is such a beautiful thing for you guys to implement something like translanguaging and something like where the teachers teach in the language that they are comfortable teaching in. जब वो किसी को समझा सकेंगी कि वो क्या कह रही हैं, किसी चीज़ का मफ़हूम क्या है, मायने क्या है, बच्चे ज़्यादा अच्छी तरह समझेंगे, and then they can go on to English and teach them in English as well. कि अच्छा इसको ये ऐसे होता है. This is what I do for my teacher trainers. It's very for my teachers that I train. It's very important for them to know the terminologies. If you go to a conference like this, to a pedagogy conference, you need to know the terminology that is being used across the world in teachers, trainers, and all. So you teach the terminology to them in Urdu. Once they get the hang of it, then you tell them, इसको अंग्रेज़ी में ये कहते हैं और आप इसको अंग्रेज़ी में इस्तेमाल कीजिए. And it really empowers the teachers, which is directly related to how they teach in the classroom and how they empower the students. So I think we have been talking about a system change. We have been talking about, a paradigm shift in the ways we teach in Pakistan, and the time has really come. Because अब अगर हम अभी कुछ नहीं करेंगे, it will be too late already.
I think too, this morning we were talking about language used to be a thing about class, and I agree with you as well that is slowly but surely dissipating, but it is still there. For example, in Newlands, where I work, we have a lot of students who don't speak Urdu. They're Pakistani, but they don't speak Urdu. And they will complain if a teacher does fall into Urdu, because then they say, but I don't understand what you're saying. We don't speak Urdu at home. Most of our students are what I would call expatriate Pakistanis. They've lived most of their lives outside of Pakistan. They may have that passport, but they identify as Canadian. They identify as American. They identify as British. And they are genuinely more comfortable in English because they only speak Urdu with their grandparents or with servants at home. And this is a big problem. We all need to remember that the OECD in Paris has declared Urdu as an endangered language. And it's up to everyone in Pakistan to do what they can, even via translanguaging, to keep Urdu at all levels alive and to keep Urdu's culture and associated and affiliated with it, and the literature and the poetry alive. It's so important to, yes, use translanguaging as a device, as a tool to help kids in the classroom, but it's also important to cultivate an understanding for Urdu as a standalone language with its own value, with its own worth, and something that we need to preserve and we need to keep alive for the generations to come. So although translanguaging is a fantastic tool to be used in the classroom, we also all need to, and this includes the foreigners living in Pakistan, we need to do everything we can to captivate the essence of the culture that is connected to Urdu and keep that alive. And that means creating a culture like you are doing, where there's excellence in Urdu teaching, and where teaching is connected to creative thinking, to creative speaking, to creative doing. And we create a classroom where the student is at the center, and also in Urdu, where it's not the teacher is conducting the whole environment of the classroom. We need to allow mistakes to happen. We need to allow children to gain confidence in Urdu and to gain a sense of independence in that language. Otherwise, they will always shun it. And they will always say, well, yeah, that's a language that I used to speak to my grandparents in, but I don't really use it otherwise. You want to definitely make sure that that does not become a future tendency, and to halt that, and to do everything you can in every single school in Pakistan to keep Urdu alive, well, kicking and evolving and developing.
Thank you, Dr. Lian. Mr. Florian, would you like to jump in here with your thoughts?
Certainly, thank you for the opportunity. Thank you, Lian, for talking about identity and power and the importance of maintaining and developing their home languages and mother tongues the way they used to be known, and to the student experience, and kind of talk about the potential that translanguaging has to move the student's experience from I can't do it now in English because I'm new to the experience of learning in English to I can because I know these things. I have the conceptual understandings and I can translate. And it's clear and it's normal that students cannot fully participate in English on day one if they don't have the background in the language, but they can still engage if they are given the opportunity to understand the content and then process the instructions in their own home languages. So just to give you some examples that would be good moments for translanguaging because they're so much more effective at helping with student comprehension and engagement. When they need to understand a vocabulary word, it's so much easier to offer the translation of the word than to re-explain the concept in a language they don't understand. If they do not understand the instructions, it's so much easier to provide instructions in the home language and not waste time on instructions when we focus on conceptual understanding. They have to process a piece of text or a piece of input that's above their ability to understand in the new language, in English at that time. Of course, you would let the students read in their own language, use translation tools to be able to understand. They want to communicate their ideas and they don't have what it takes to the level of cognitive ability to do that coherently in a new language. It's okay if one of the students draws a diagram and labels it in their home language rather than writing an essay in English on day one. When they have a need, an emotional, a well-being need, a personal need, and they can't express that, I think we owe the students this opportunity to express themselves where it really uh, where they can. So really, translanguaging is less about languages than it is about set. The teachers who are inclusive of other cultures and communities are more likely to create spaces for this and to allow students to translanguage. These teachers understand what students can and cannot do with their different languages. And I think teachers are in a good place to encourage students to use home languages at school so they can have better access to the learning. And some teachers worry, oh, this sounds like rocket science. I need to know 15 different languages to be able to do this in the classroom. That's not true. Monolingual teachers can support and encourage translanguaging and multilingualism in the classroom. You don't have to know the language to invite students to engage in the content and share and brainstorm in their own languages with peers that you know are able in that language. Just think about what students bring to school and when it's appropriate and when it's useful. So students use different tools of their whole toolbox. And we have a very huge champion in the IB world that works on translanguaging a lot, Virginia Rojas, also known as Jeannie Rojas. And I want to quote her to close this. Translanguaging, she says, is the can. Not only the can do, but also the can do at grade level.
There are students in our classroom who are quite proficient in English and they do not feel the pride in accepting their languages. So such students, they usually go abroad, but what about the students who are to stay back in Pakistan and who are to be the future leaders of Pakistan? They usually come from such schools like TNS or Beacon House, where the monolingualism culture is very dominant. What about those students who are to lead the future of Pakistan? We've seen certain examples in our political industry, not to stir any controversy, but we've seen examples where rather than the followers of the political leader, rather than they should follow their objectives, they rather make memes of their speeches because they were that good in Urdu. So this is an issue that we should cater, because if we do not cater this from our classroom, we can taint the future of Pakistan. We can taint the future of our country, because these people are to be a family
for their followers, not an alien, not a stranger, just because they do not understand the language or speak the language of their culture, of the people of their color. So I feel that we also need to cater this example, because such examples are a life lesson for us to know the importance of translanguaging in our classrooms. Because if we do not do it from the get-go, we can risk the future of our country.
Okay, so I wanna segue from what Florian just said about, and I'm gonna bring in proficiency levels. Translanguaging will work best when the teacher knows the proficiency level of their students. If you don't know the proficiency level of your students, you don't know if they should or should not be translanguaging. If you have students, if you have a class full of students who are at an advanced level of proficiency, speaking proficiency, and they translanguage, as an Urdu instructor, as an Urdu teacher, I would not allow that in the classroom, because they don't need that extra tool. They don't need the tool of translanguaging. And when I talk about proficiency levels, I see that there are none in Pakistan that are officially being followed. There is no proficiency testing in Urdu in Pakistan. And I think there's a great need for that. We have proficiency tests in Urdu that have been developed in the US that we use all the time. And I think it's very, very important that we work with teachers here, with schools here, with perhaps the government, and bring in proficiency testing for Urdu languages, not just in oral proficiency, but reading and writing, so that when you accept students, and it brings in the concept of differentiated instruction, that will all make sense. These are all connected. So it's not just one concept. All the concepts, all the practices are connected. And to what you say, we were just talking about that, and I just wanted to add that. We were talking about the fact that, and then how Leanne mentioned, and we all know that there's the prestige of Urdu is going down, it's spiraling downwards. And I was telling these two young girls, and I said, we should all learn to speak English, because it's lingua franca. It's very important to know the language, to be able to communicate effectively globally, but not at the cost of your own language. I can speak fluent Urdu, I can speak fluent English. Why is it that I could learn the two and the kids in this generation cannot do that? What has changed? So nothing has changed really as far as our brains go. We can do much more than two languages, we can do many more. So I think it's very, very important, and it's people like them. They can, these kids are influencers. These are the kids that other children follow, whether we like it or we don't like it. We have an economic disparity that is associated with the Urdu language, and that is a reality in Pakistan. When kids like them, when people who are sitting here, that people look up to and say, oh, ये तो बड़े cool हैं, हमें इनके जैसे बनना चाहिए, जैसे ये बोल रहे हैं हमें ऐसे ही बोलना चाहिए. तो जब इनके मुंह से वो उर्दू सुनेंगे, तो वो उर्दू को अहमियत देना शुरू कर देंगे. It will not take 1 day or 2 days. It probably will take a whole 10 years of that school cycle, but that is something that needs to be done very, very proactively. Very proactively, make it as part of your school curriculum. And people like Leanne, who's not even from Pakistan, she understands the importance, and we need to recognize that. It's about time. तो आप लोगों से मेरी गुजारिश यही होगी कि बहुत फ़खरिया बोलिए, क्योंकि हमने ये बात भी की थी कि we are very proud when we say, oh, I don't know any Urdu, oh, my spelling is so bad, I can barely write in Urdu, oh my God. Imagine if you were to say that about English. Oh, my English is so bad, I can't spell the word reiterate. I would die before I say that, right? So, ये इंग्लिश के लिए क्यों ठीक क्यों उर्दू के लिए क्यों सही है और इंग्लिश के लिए सही क्यों नहीं है? That needs to be changed. That needs to be changed.
So if I can just, it didn't take me long. I tried to see for myself how long it would take me to find a study on translanguaging done in Pakistan by Pakistanis. It took me under 5 minutes, and I found a peer-reviewed and scholarly reviewed article on the efficacy of translanguaging. And I would just like to share with you some of the results that were found after this combined study between LUMS and NUST. So the efficacy of using translanguaging as a tool in the classroom has the following impacts, and this is directly out of the book of 21st Century Teaching and Learning. So for those of you who are teachers here, you really need to listen to this because this is impactful for you. So basically, turn-taking improves, topic shift improves, the learning ease improves, being able to identify positioning, multilingual word negotiation words improves. Linguistically, socially, culturally, and identity-wise, kids are able to explore better. They are able to raise questions with ease. They are able to describe normal and usual practices with ease. They are more comfortable to participate. They are able to express concepts and idea clarification with better efficacy. They can make their learning more effective through a variety of tools. They make sense of and they communicate ideas much, much better. They negotiate, they are able to negotiate with more clarity because they're more comfortable with their word choices. They can develop a linguistic proficiency and language repertoire with much greater ease. Socializing has come up as the #1 impact. So in other words, they are able to socialize because they feel accepted, they feel that they belong in the classroom. And remember, ladies and gentlemen, belonging is part of well-being. They can elaborate on their ideas, and they basically feel more comfortable in a classroom. Ladies and gentlemen, if you are a teacher, you need to hear these words. Thank you.
All right, so we are almost out of time. So I'm going to now move to the question and answer session. We have questions here with me that the audience have given us. So Mr. Florian, I'll actually start with you. One of the questions we have here is, what is the difference between translanguaging and code switching?
Thank you for bringing that up. Code switching is, we've heard examples during our conversation today. It's about changing the language of communication as it's opportunistic or necessary. And translanguaging goes beyond that in terms of using the language repertoires of the students in order to allow them to create an awareness of progressing in a language. So code switching is just a small part of that shift, that change between languages, and translanguaging goes beyond that. Translanguaging as a tool challenges the monolingual assumptions that languages are learned separately. Translanguaging refers to teaching practices that use multilingualism as a resource instead of looking at it as a problem. And then translanguaging also describes the sum of practices that all students and educators who use bilingualism as a resource. So a bilingual person is not two monolingual people in one, which each language linked to a separate culture, rather than a multilingual person or a bilingual person is a person with a complex language and a culture and cultural practices that are changing depending on the individual situation and local practice. So translanguaging really is dipping into that reality of what we have stored inside our brains in terms of experience with language, and is linked to a broader definition of literacy in which different ways of communication media help construct conceptual understandings of the world. So translanguaging is a broader idea of using linguistic capacity and experiences to make sense conceptually of the word. Thank you for that question. It's quite interesting because it's so easy sometimes to say, oh, we've used both languages. And I really appreciate having Urdu in the conversation today to kind of exemplify how we can build on conceptual understandings using what we bring to the table. And many of us bring different gifts to the table. I'm an adult English learner. My first day learning English is when I showed up at my first teaching job, supposed to teach French, and half of my schedule said English, and I was so scared. And I told my principal, I don't speak English. And she said, you speak now. So you can imagine what translanguaging I had to engage with and what type of transfer and everything possible, because my 8th graders were a lot better than me the first week of school. So that's what translanguaging can bring to you, that idea of transfer and kind of affirming identities to bring forth all the gifts that we come to school with.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Florian. So another question we have is, will translanguaging...
Just a little introduction. I was quite aghast and alarmed by the comment made by Dr. Lean Wotton, quoting the OECD that Urdu is an endangered language, like an endangered species. I am the president of Anjuman Taraqi Urdu Pakistan Society for Promotion of Urdu, which was established in India initially in 1903, and this is the successor organization. I mean, this is something for which there should be special sessions for the Urdu being an endangered language. What I realized some time back, that the capability other languages have, which Urdu is lacking, and that is that if I select a text on a smart device in English, it will read it to me. Hindi, it will read it to me. Bangla, it will read it to me. French, it will read it to me. But Urdu, we don't have that. So I think we need to identify what is lacking for Urdu to be declared, endangered, and what are the means under the current technological advancement that can be used to actually take care of those things. We, the Anjuman Taraqi Urdu Pakistan and NAD Engineering University, we have embarked upon a project that is using artificial intelligence and optical character recognition. We are working on enabling Urdu speech to text and text to speech. I don't know how far that is going to go, because I'm quite alarmed, and conceptually we are quite against transliterating Urdu. Now, like my servant who doesn't know English, he wants to send me a message, he writes in Roman Urdu. Ghar aa jao, phone kar lo. वो सब Roman में, they write in Roman. So I think that is also a threat. I was told by the MD of Young Group that they're working out on issuing the Young paper, which is an Urdu paper published in London, transliterated into Roman. I was quite alarmed.
Yes.
I mean, this is going to be a total destruction.
Yes.
And I'll urge upon the management of Beacon House for the next SOT at least to have some sessions on this also, and also I'll suggest to others. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. And I most certainly take your comments on board, and I do want to say that I totally agree with you that there is a bias in technology towards certain languages. I absolutely agree with you. And the first thing to do that we have to work on is when we have these tools, these automated tools that translate languages and use Latin letters when actually there are other, it's not the characteristic of the language itself, that these chip away, these take away from the language. I totally agree with you, and I will bring your points that you have so rightfully mentioned this morning about Urdu and how to maintain and to build working groups and to do what we can do as educational institutions to keep Urdu alive and well, and also at its top form, and maybe even better, right? So I absolutely agree with you. And if anyone is working with a company that is involved with technology, please make your voice heard, because I think we have to move away from this bias towards certain economically strong languages, right? Languages that are important for the economy, right? And we cannot forget other languages. If I can just say, we haven't talked about the root of translanguaging. I think although translanguaging has been happening for many years, thousands of years probably, because if you would have spoken to Cleopatra, She spoke, 12 languages. If you had spoken to Queen Elizabeth I, she spoke 7 or 8 languages. It's not like it's a new thing. We're just sort of finally labeling it and putting it into a context and a structure. But if you really look at translanguaging, yes, it can be harmful, but if we can harness it in a way that we grab its power and we use it to our advantage, then I do think we're doing a good thing. I really do, because we should never shame someone for the language they're speaking. That is wrong. And when I was growing up, that was done a lot in classrooms, especially with immigrant children. And I don't think we should do that. If someone speaks Pashto and they're in a school in Islamabad and they don't speak Urdu, we shouldn't stand by and say nothing when we see kids or teachers laughing in a corner. I've seen it. His Urdu, oh God, dreadful. We shouldn't be doing that. We should be embracing that child and embracing that child's ability to speak in many languages. So I'm sorry, because this happened in between the question. Beg your pardon. Absolutely. Yeah, sort of got sidetracked there. Will translanguaging assist with language acquisition, or will it lead to the creation of another language? I don't think it leads to language building. I think it leads to a better understanding of all languages, and it leads to a respect for all languages, and it leads to an understanding of how translanguaging can help us all learn. And what I think the most important thing about translanguaging is, it's tolerance. We learn to tolerate those who are other than ourselves, who believe other than ourselves, and who think other than we do. And that is a very important point for our kids to learn. I think translanguaging has a peace-building aspect to it. If we tolerate, we are peaceful, right? If we want to create a world for our young people, so they're not talking about wars in Ukraine or Kashmir or whatever, then we have to create an environment of respect and tolerance. And doesn't that start with knowing someone else's language and culture? And respecting their food and their beliefs and what they do every day, their customs? Doesn't it, on some level, begin there? Or can it begin there? Can't it begin there? Isn't that a way, to open a door to go to a... Last night we were at a wonderful musical. It was a fusion, jazz fusion, sort of, Pakistani, Western style music, and it was translanguaging for me because it was this interesting mix of two cultures coming together. It was beautiful, and that's translanguaging too. It's the culture as well. So if we really harness translanguaging to use it for our betterment, I don't think we have to worry about a language being eroded. I think we have to be grateful that we have yet another tool to create peace. Thank you.
Kandil, I'll take you for this question. So do you think that we as humans have become less empathetic due to social pressure? It also affects us at the professional level. We simply take pride in English and shame in other languages.
Okay, so we do take pride in English and shame in other languages. I think that shame, it's very sad to say, but it's especially directed towards Urdu, as was being discussed earlier. There is a stigma that's attached to speaking in Urdu, generally. The schools like TNS, Beacon House Newlands, and all of them, the kind of students that we cater to, the kind of socio-economic strata that they belong to, Urdu is frowned down upon. So we're in the classroom, if I'm teaching French and I'm explaining something to them in Urdu, students going home and telling their parents, Miss ne class, French class Urdu mein hui hai, ya Miss ne hame ye cheez Urdu mein samjhai hai, can lead to problems because when you have the next parent-teacher conference, the parents grind you for it. They say, French class mein Urdu kyun bol rahe hain? Or in an English class, why is the teacher speaking in Urdu to explain something? Does she not have the linguistic ability to communicate effectively in English or in French that she's resorting to Urdu. As you mentioned before, students have this kind of, the students belonging to this background, they speak Urdu to their grandparents, or they speak Urdu with their servants. That's two classes. So that's the aged, the slightly aged people, and then the masses, or people in the lower income strata. We need to stop this classification. And I think this is where the role of parents comes in, that it's really important for our institutions to also educate the parents that there is nothing wrong with speaking Urdu in class or in school, for to learn any subject for that matter. In fact, they should be encouraged to speak Urdu at home as well with their kids. There's nothing wrong with that, because these students are they're the future leaders of, they are the future leaders of Pakistan. If they're shamed by their own language, then, I mean, as you said, trying to bring a change at a national level or an international level will be more difficult.
It's actually not classification, it's gentrification.
Exactly.
It's gentrification, and if you allow a gentrification to persist in this country, it leads to a neo-colonial mindset, right?
Exactly.
We know that, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So we need to really lift Urdu. We really need to lift Urdu, and we can also use translanguaging as a tool for that.
And we do. And one example which I've always noticed is that whenever our leaders or our cricket team, for instance, whenever they're traveling abroad and they're giving interviews or speeches, I don't understand why they don't give them in Urdu. It's not a matter of whether or not they speak English. It's just all the other leaders, so the leaders of China or any other Western country, whenever they're traveling to another country, they're representing their own country. They speak in their own language and they have an interpreter on standby. So why are our leaders embarrassed of conducting a speech in Urdu?
So going back to what you said, that the parents want the students to either be taught in English or in French. I think one of the solutions we did talk about earlier was having a conference for the parents, a session for the parents on these teaching practices. But listen, we have a problem with our society. They will listen to people like Leanne. They will listen to people like Florian. They might listen to me because I'm visiting from an elite university abroad. If that is what they want to listen to, let them listen to it. But let them hear out what we have to say. And on another note, every single young person I have talked to over the last few years, and especially this year, kids from grammar school, kids from Beacon House, kids from Bayview, every single one, lovely kids. Our kids are lovely. They are the best of the lot. सारे बच्चे, जिस भी स्कूल के हों. हर बच्चा जो इंग्लिश मीडियम स्कूल में जाता है या जिसको इंग्लिश ज़्यादा अच्छी आती है, they acknowledge the fact that, oh yes, Urdu does not have the prestige. Oh yes, Urdu को importance नहीं है. Oh yes, we should be speaking in English, in Urdu. But what happens is that somehow the societal pressure is so much that after that expression of solidarity with Urdu, they switch back to English. So it's your responsibility to be the trendsetter and say, you know what, I'm not going to speak in English. You can translanguage as much as code switch rather, so you can code switch as much as you can, but be that trendsetter and say, मैं उर्दू में बोलूँगी, चलो उर्दू में बात करते हैं.
Yeah, no, I agree. I have students when the first day of class, the first question they always ask is, Miss, Urdu aati hai aapko? Because they want to know how the teacher feels about the language. And I say, हाँ, मुझे बिल्कुल आती है. They're like, Miss, but you're teaching French. Urdu कैसे सीखी आपने? So the idea that, okay, you know, just because I'm Pakistani and I speak French and I speak English does not mean that I don't have, yeah.
Great. On behalf of Beacon House, I want to thank all of our esteemed panelists, Mr. Florian, Ms. Rumina, Dr. Lian, Ali Shaba, and Kandil, along with our audience for participating in SOT Edition 15, Guardians of the Future. Please do share your feedback about this session through an email that you will receive from the SOT team. Do also visit our immersive art exhibit, Coexist, Go Exit, and our Classrooms of Tomorrow exhibit spread across the venue.
We also thank our lead sponsor, UBL, for their continued support, as well as all our other sponsors, without whom it would not be possible for us to bring the SOT to you. Thank you very much for joining us today.